Imagine a man so tormented that no chains could hold him, cutting himself day and night, yelling out day and night. A man who lived among the tombs, the town around him completely afraid, the man himself completely and totally controlled, until one day Jesus approaches after crossing over a storm-tossed sea. And the man himself, the tormented one, has no choice but to throw himself in submission at the feet of Jesus. Today in Mark chapter 5, we're going to encounter the demoniac that lived among the tombs, a man who was controlled by a legion of demons, until he meets Jesus and is completely transformed. Today we're going to learn that there is no power that God cannot overcome. There's no power that God cannot contain. There's no man, no woman, no child who is outside the scope of what God himself can do in Jesus Christ. Thanks for joining us again today on Washed by the Water. I want to read Mark chapter 5, and we're going to start in verse 1, and we're going to read about this man who has been controlled completely by the legion. So if you would, this is what the Word of God says. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus had stepped out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit. He lived among the tombs, and no one could bind him anymore, not even with the chain. For he had often been bound with shackles and chains, but he wrenched the chains apart, and he broke the shackles in pieces. No one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains, he was always crying out and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and fell down before him. And crying out with a loud voice, he said, "What have you to do with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, do not torment me." For he was saying to him, "Come out of the man, you unclean spirit." And Jesus asked him, "What is your name?" He replied, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he begged him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Now a great herd of pigs was feeding there on the hillside, and they begged him, saying, "Send us to the pigs, let us enter them." So he gave them permission. And the unclean spirits came out and entered the pigs. And the herd, numbering about 2,000, rushed down the steep bank into the sea and drowned in the sea. The herdsmen fled and told it in the city and in the country. And people came out to see what it was that had happened. And they came to Jesus and saw the demon-possessed man, the one who had had the legion, sitting there, clothed and in his right mind. And they were afraid. And those who had seen it described to them what had happened to the demon-possessed man and to the pigs. And they began to beg Jesus to depart from their region. And he was getting into the boat. As he was getting into the boat, the man who had been possessed with demons begged him that he might be with him. And he did not permit him, but said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them how much the Lord has done for you, and how he has had mercy on you." And he went away to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him. And everyone marveled. You know, the Decapolis was a league of 10 Gentile cities, ripe with pagan culture. This was totally Roman at the time. Now, the different things that they had going on there was they had lewd plays. They had all kinds of weird, crazy sporting events. They even had nude sporting events, which is absolutely detestable. They got pagan temples there, all that culture that goes along with it. It was a totally unclean territory for the Jews because they were ripe with pig farming there as well. That's how they made a lot of their money. There's a lot of things that's a lot of what they ate. Now, Jesus had not yet declared all foods clean, which he would eventually. And so for the Jews at that time, man, they didn't want to have anything to do with this type of territory. And remember, this demoniac, he didn't just exist anywhere. He was living in the tombs, and that was also a completely unclean, like off limits territory for the Jews at that time. They didn't want to go around there. They want to make themselves unclean. You know what I'm saying? Be around that kind of stuff. But Jesus himself walks right in. It seems to me that every time we find Jesus, he's always in a spot that, according to the Jews, he's not supposed to be. And according to the Jews, that's too dangerous for them. It's going to make him unclean, and they can't understand why in the world he would be there. Remember that other time that they were talking about, hey, how come you're eating amongst sinners? You know what I'm saying? You're inviting yourself. You're being brought into homes where you shouldn't be. You're among people that you shouldn't be around. Well, lo and behold, Jesus doesn't listen to any of that. He actually goes into territory that's supposed to be off limits just so that he would save those people. This man at the tombs is he's a wild representation of how far Jesus goes in order to save. We find here that Jesus crosses the sea for one man. One man. Nobody wanted him to stay there, but he crosses the sea for one man so that one man would go into that territory and share his testimony of what Jesus had done for him and how God had had mercy on him. This is so encouraging to me. You know, this man's condition was pretty dire. It was a superhuman strength, though, was wild. You know what I'm saying? And that's something that we see in the scriptures. And that's something that we see that is actually typical or can become typical of people who are controlled and possessed by demons. And I want to hit you with some different examples in a little while of how we can tell if we're dealing with a demon or just somebody who's sick, somebody who's just living and existing in this fallen world where things happen and, the mind breaks down or the body breaks down. These are some of the things that I want to point out for you today. One of the key points that I want to bring out is that Jesus crosses into this Gentile territory on purpose. This is not an accident. And so what we know, first of all, is that God is purposeful in everything that he does. Like, he means to go there. He means to save this guy. And remember, this is a storm-tossed sea. Like, they literally were just in the boat where the disciples are like, the storms are coming about them. Jesus is asleep with a pillow under his head at the stern, the text says. And the disciples, they're like losing it. They're getting all scared and everything. And doesn't he care? Doesn't he care that we're dying out here? And they're so terrified and afraid. And Jesus wakes up and he calms the wind and the seas, and they obey him. And so that even the disciples, after seeing that miracle happen, they say, who is this that even the wind and the seas obey him? Jesus takes a wonderful opportunity there to say and tell them, in paraphrase in some different words, he tells them, your faith, where is your faith? You need to believe. And one of the incredible things that Jesus does in this interaction is he teaches the disciples about faith at night, right before they're about to approach some serious darkness that's all wrapped up and contained in a man who is absolutely and completely possessed by this legion of demons. Another thing that I want to point out is that demons recognize the authority of Jesus. And this is incredibly important for us. We need to know that we don't have to be afraid in the presence of anyone or anything in this world. I was actually talking to someone after a church service here recently, telling me that, in these kinds of situations, it's scary for them. And I definitely understand where they're coming from. But see, in Jesus, we don't need to be afraid of entering into any spaces, places, or territories. We need to know that Jesus is our protector. And then when we have God with us, in us, through faith in Jesus Christ, then we've got everything that we need. There's an authority that these demons recognize about Jesus. There's an authority that they submit to and surrender to because of who Jesus is. And this is one of the wildest things to me. The demons automatically recognize the authority of Christ while we're fighting in this world, like we're struggling, we feel like we're kind of like speaking to a wall, almost beating our heads against the wall, just trying to convince people in this world, persuade people in this world that Jesus is the Christ, that he is God the Son. Demons recognize Jesus, but people have issues doing it. And now this is completely a work of the demons themselves. If they can contain, if they can control, if they can inhabit, if they can possess, then they can keep one from recognizing the authority of Jesus Christ and who he actually is. One of the things about these demons is that as soon as they go into the pigs, and this is another point that I want to make, they immediately show their destructive nature, these demons. Like the pigs immediately, right after the demons go into the pigs, what happens? The pigs just rush down the bank. They rush down the bank and they like drown themselves in the water. Incredible. Remember, the scripture says that the enemy, he's out to, he aims to seek, to kill and destroy. Right? He wants to find you. He wants to look for you. He wants to seek out places that he hasn't been. He wants to steal, right? He wants to kill and he wants to destroy. Know this about the enemy. One of the greatest strengths that we have in this life is that we have insight into the enemy's tricks, into his schemes, into the ploys that he uses. And if you'll notice, he uses the same types of things over and over throughout the history of time, and that we have recorded for us in the scriptures. And so we see again their destructive nature, literally killing the pigs right off the bat. And the possession, the inhabitation of the demons in the pigs themselves causes them to absolutely go crazy, and they rush down into the water and drown themselves immediately. One of the things that I was thinking about when I read this was, in Matthew, it talks to us about, the Lord tells us about how demons, when they leave a man, when a demon leaves a person, right? And that person has the whole house clean, but it's empty. That the demon goes out and seeks, he goes out into waterless places seeking to find rest somewhere, but the demon can't find rest in those waterless places. So he comes back to the host that's empty, right? And being empty there, we know, is like there's no presence of God. There's no faith in Jesus. So if God is not there, then that place is open. It's vacant. It's ready to be filled. And so we have to be filled with someone, with something. And not only are we there, but we've got to be filled with the Spirit of the Lord. But if we're not filled with the Spirit of the Lord, that demon's got clear, he's got like a clear path. He's got it in. The door is open. The windows have been cracked. You know what I'm saying? And he's all the way in. And it says that he brings others with him. That demon brings others with him so that the last state of the person is worse than the first. When it says that they go out they go into waterless places seeking to find rest, but can't find any. And the human body, I know, is mostly made up of water. And then we see the pigs inhabited and possessed by the demons literally rushing right out into the water. It's interesting to me at the very least. You know what I'm saying? There's a bit of a correlation there between water. They need a host. These demons, they need a host. They want a host. They desire a host. It's like they don't just exist around. They're in something, in someone, going around to find some sort of host to inhabit. One of the things that is interesting to me as well about the Lord and how good he is that he's teaching us like constantly about the things that are going on in this world and how we can address certain issues that we face. And I want to let you know a little something here about these demons, that it doesn't take inhabitation in order to possess. And what do I mean by that? Well, the town doesn't want to have anything to do with Jesus. As soon as Jesus, those pigs get destroyed, and they're pig farmers, and they're like, man, this guy done messed up with our life. He messed with our livelihood. As soon as they find out what happened, they see this man clothed in his right mind. They're like, please leave. They're like afraid of him in some way, but also that they're choosing their pigs over Jesus. That's absolutely wild to me. Like, they're going to choose the pigs over Jesus? The pigs over Jesus. That's exactly what they do. And so they are, in a certain way, they are possessed as well. Maybe not inhabited the way that the legion inhabited the man and then the pigs, but they are held captive by this demonic presence. And remember, possession, it doesn't, like the word, if we think about the word possession, it doesn't literally mean that there is an inhabitation, right? Possession is just like, remember, if something is in your possession, like you possess, like your wallet's in your possession, you're just in control of that wallet. You have it, you have it captive. It belongs to you. You are not inhabiting the wallet, but the wallet belongs to you. Right? In the same way, these demons, it doesn't seem that they have to actually inhabit someone to control them or to possess them. There can be some kind of like general possession, general control of a territory. And in this instance, it's a country. It's an entire country. The demons themselves, right? They say, "Oh, don't send us out of the country." Now, why would the demons say, "Don't send us out of the country"? You ever think about that? It's an interesting one. Why would they say, don't send us out of the country unless the country was hospitable to them? I don't want to leave places I feel comfortable in. I don't always want to go out to an uncomfortable place if I don't have to. You know what I'm saying? And I think you'll agree with me. I think you know where I'm coming from. This country was hospitable to these demons. It was under their possession. There was probably other people in the town who were also actually inhabited by demons, but the entire country was under their control. The reaction of these people is horrible, right? They choose the pigs over Jesus. But I want you to pay attention to the commission that Jesus gives, because he leaves that place, right? He's going to leave. The man's begging, hey, can I stay with you? Can I go with you? Can I be with you? And Jesus says no. And it's interesting. Now, we would like to think, I think sometimes maybe that, like, every person who Jesus encounters, if they're like, can I go with you? He's like, yeah, come on. You see, but we need to understand through this text also that, like, not every place is for every person. But guess what? Some places are for every person. Like, there's a place for you. There's a place for me to exist, to live, to work out my salvation, as the Bible says, with fear and trembling before the Lord. There's a place for you. And this place of the Gerasenes, this Decapolis, that was the place for this man. And that was the place where his salvation would be worked out. That's exactly where Jesus wanted him. And this actually is the first person who's actually commissioned by Jesus to go out and share testimony about the mercy of Christ and the mercy of what God had done for him. Now, others go out, for sure. Others go out before this. But this was the first one that Jesus actually commissions, go and tell. Go and say this. Go and let them know. Go and be a testimony. Go and be a light, so to speak, in this dark place. And so what does this teach us? Well, it teaches us that Jesus is the light in the darkness, and that if we have an encounter with Christ, then we too can be a light in dark places. And I hope this is something that we always know, that we can be a light even in dark places. Some of the different distinctives that we see here that can tell us whether or not someone is actually possessed are interesting. We see superhuman strength, right? We see self-harm. There was another encounter that Jesus had when a man said, "Hey, Lord, will you heal my son?" A spirit possesses him and causes him like to harm himself, to like throw himself into the fire, or trying to drown him, throwing him into the water to destroy him. There's a self-harm aspect here when there's demon possession. Again, a superhuman strength aspect here when there's demon possession. I remember a time when I was working as a mental health worker at the beginning of when I was starting to enter into the ministry and get trained in the ministry as a pastor. And I was working in the Texas Hill Country, and I was at a crisis unit, right? It was a place where people like that were either an extreme danger to themselves or someone else, would go there for anywhere, from a couple of days up to 14 days, just a crisis center. And they would, see a psychiatrist, psychologist. They would get put on some kind of medication. They'd be hooked up with some type of social worker or somebody who would help them to get plugged into like a community, so they would get help and receive help afterward. And there was this guy who was maybe 130 pounds soaking wet. He was probably like 5'3", 5'4", like a smaller guy. I mean, probably, and this was a while back, no taller than like 5'5", probably, right? And so, smaller guy. And one day, the nurses had to rush in, and there was a couple of different staff workers on shift. Then there were bigger guys. And this guy was like literally banging his head over and over again against this like closet that was in the room that held like some linens and things. Well, I mean, obviously there was no linens in there because those could be dangerous to someone, but like pillows and things like that. And a lot of times those things were just empty. If they were in a room with somebody who was a severe danger to themselves. But he was like banging his head up against this cabinet, and then they went in and he started banging his head against the floor. And this is like linoleum flooring, so there's like concrete literally right underneath there. So like basically banging his head against the concrete over and over and over again at like hard, you know what I'm saying? Like hard. Not like, you know what I'm saying? Like, no, this guy was, and he was completely under control. Under the control of something, you know what I'm saying? Like it wasn't just normal, like some kind of weird episode. Like this was an inhabitation. And that's one of the things that I encountered several times in that place, was actual inhabitation of demons. And so not everybody, you know what I'm saying? Because listen, the world is fallen. People get sick. The mind can deteriorate just like the heart can, just like the body does. You know what I'm saying? Muscles deteriorate. The mind can deteriorate as well, or deteriorate. And it can also present itself in certain ways where we find that there's mental illness going on. Not every mental illness is possession, but sometimes it is straight up possession. And I've seen it firsthand. Well, these bigger guys, there was like 3 of them, I think, had to go and try to subdue this smaller guy. Mind you, remember, this is a smaller guy. I'm talking, there was somebody in there that was like probably almost 300 pounds, like 6'4". There was big dudes up in there. You know what I'm saying? Like not small guys, big dudes up in there. And they were like, it took everything that they had, every bit of strength. They came out of there just exhausted, sweating, you know what I'm saying? Breathing all heavy. And they had to go and subdue the guy, hold him down so that the nurse could, like the nurse could come in with a shot. And they gave him they gave him some Ativan or something to kind of tranquilize him, and just so that his body would finally give up and go to sleep, just to save him from himself. And I think that's even an interesting way to word it, right? Because it's not really saving him from himself, but to kind of like save his body from whatever was trying to destroy him. There's some kind of superhuman strength that we deal with when demons are present, that also leads to self-harm in ways that will absolutely destroy someone if not handled correctly. So we have to watch out for those types of things. There's also a supernatural knowledge that we see that demons have. Remember, these demons, they know who Jesus is. They recognize the authority of Christ. And as I said earlier, it's interesting that the demons understand and recognize the authority of Christ, but we have so much trouble in this world helping people to understand the authority of Christ. Like literally, there's people all over social media just arguing about how, oh, Jesus is not God. I get it in my comments. Oh, we shouldn't worship Jesus. You got to worship God and only God. I'm like, Jesus is God. I mean, it's something that we know as believers in Christ, but not everybody understands that. And that's something that we have to contend with as well. But these demons, they have a supernatural knowledge where they actually do understand who exactly Jesus is. And guess what they do when they understand that they're in contact with Jesus? They fall in submission at his feet. They surrender. It's like, I give up. I give up. I think about that old. I tell this illustration often is like, I used to watch when I was growing up. I used to watch WWF back when it was WWF before it was WWE, right? And I used to watch Hulk Hogan all the time. The Hulkster was my favorite. You know what I'm saying? Ultimate Warrior, all these guys. Ultimate Warrior is weird though. I've like heard his I've watched some of his stuff back, and I'm like, he's talking to some spirits and all this. I'm like, dude, you were weird. I don't even know why. Anyway, I don't even know why I like that stuff. But I remember Ric Flair. Ric Flair would be like, oh no, you know what I'm saying? He would be like all like, walking all weird, and then he'd go into the corner and he'd just be like this, no. And there's the Hulkster, he's like, he's about to get him. That's what I think about these demons. As soon as they see Jesus, they're like, no, don't send us out of the country. Don't send us out of the country. Please don't send us out of the country. Can we just go into them pigs? Jesus is like, all right. So he allows it. He permits it. Everyone has to ask permission, no matter who you are, what you are, from Jesus in order to continue to go on in life. So we are dealing with, right, superhuman strength. We're dealing with self-harm. We're dealing with a supernatural knowledge. Also, we know that sometimes when demons are present, there's more than one present, right? There's sometimes where it's one, and then there's sometimes where it's multiple, like this time with the guy with the legion of demons. And there's also, because it was mentioned in 3 Gospels, and in one of the Gospels, it mentions that there's 2 men at the tombs. Mark finds it important just to talk about the one and focus on the one man. So I'll just focus on the one man. But we know there are multiple demons present in this man. But also, the Scripture tells us that Mary Magdalene was one whom the Lord he had cured her of being possessed by many demons. But there was many spirits in her. She had multiple demons in her too. That's wild. Which also shows us, right, that nobody is too far gone. This man gets commissioned by Jesus to go and share his testimony. Mary Magdalene, right, ends up being one of Jesus's closest followers, who then goes from the resurrection tomb to grab the disciples and be like, come to the tomb. You know what I'm saying? And so she gets commissioned to go and tell the disciples about Jesus's resurrection. And of course, they got to come see it for themselves. And why not, right? Golly, can you imagine how beautiful that must have been to go and see the empty tomb? Well, Mary Magdalene, one whom he had cast several demons out of, ends up being the very person who was commissioned to go and tell the disciples that Jesus has risen from the dead. So I want to talk to you just in closing and ask you, what are you facing today? What different things are you facing today that maybe aren't a complete and total inhabitation, possession by demons, but maybe there's a host of problems. Maybe there's a legion of problems that you're facing today. Well, I submit those to the feet of Christ. Bring those to Jesus and ask him to help you, and ask him to fix these issues for you. And I promise you, he will help you. He's going to be right there to help. And sometimes in life, to be sure, it's not that Jesus completely eradicates those problems, but helps us with perspective while we're still in the problem, as an opportunity to sanctify us, to sharpen us, to build us, the character that we have, the hope that we have, the faith to endure through suffering. Sometimes it's those very problems that we face that end up shaping us. And if we're Christians, those are the very things. Those are the very things. They are the exact things that shape us and bring us closer to Christ in the midst of problems. So what's maybe the legion of problems, the different things that you're dealing with? Who is it in your life that maybe isn't there to help at all? Maybe they're a pestering spirit. Maybe there's just someone around you that's just pestering, and you've poured in, and you've poured in, and you've poured in, and your bank account's drained helping them. Your emotional bank is drained helping them. Your physical bank is drained helping them. And they just don't seem to want to shift, to make a change, to submit their lives to Christ. Maybe there's a demon in your midst that's pestering you and it's wearing you thin. Remember, he seeks to steal, to kill, to destroy. He seeks. The enemy's like a prowling lion. Jesus tells Cain after, he's all distraught. Cain, why is your face fallen? And he says, the enemy is crouching, right? Sin. He says, sin is crouching at the door and its desire is for you, but you must rule over it. It's wanting to control you, sin is. So one of the things that we need to know as well is maybe some of the problems that we're facing isn't some demon pestering us from the outside. Maybe it's just the sin that's living inside. Have you dealt with your sin? Have you brought your sin to Christ and asked him for his forgiveness? Have you brought your problems to Jesus? The ones that you deal with all the time, maybe some recurring sin that you're dealing with. I pray that you bring them to Jesus. Another thing that I want you to know today is that Jesus, when he has mercy on you, wants you, like this man, to go and tell somebody about it. To go and share this gospel of grace, to go and share about the mercy of Jesus and how he's forgiven you, how he's washed you clean. Remember, the theme of this channel is that Jesus speaks and says, already you are clean because of the word I have spoken to you. That Christ, he washes us with the water of the word. Come to Jesus. Let him have mercy on you. And then go and tell somebody about it. And finally, don't fear the cost. Don't be afraid of how much it's going to cost you to follow Jesus. Because I guarantee you what you will gain will far outweigh anything that you ever lose for the sake of Christ. As Paul said, for me, to die is gain. Even death to him was gaining. Don't fear of what you have to lose. Don't worry that God wants you to give up your former way of life before coming to him. I promise you, he is worth it, and he is worthy of it. Nobody you will ever meet in your life will ever be worthy of all of your devotion. No person, no human being. But I promise you this. I promise you this. Jesus is. He alone is worthy of your devotion and your praise. So give him your life. Give him your life. Lose your life for his sake and for the gospel. And then you will find it. Thanks so much for joining us today on Washed by the Water. If this has affected you or helped you in some way, I'm asking you to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with your friends, share it with your family members, share with anybody that you think will benefit from this. We love you so much, and I thank you for allowing me to speak into your life, to share the good news of the gospel of Jesus Christ, that he's here to save us to the uttermost. If he can go to the tombs to save a man, to save a country, he can come into your life, to your house, to your home, to save you and your family. So give him everything, trust him, and love him. And thanks for being with us today. God bless you. And we'll see you soon.